Welcome back to BLOCKTV. It's time now for Power Blocks. Now today we're going to talk about a topic that has been thrown into the light by the announcement of the Libra project. A question of where the power lies when it comes to crypto governance. Now, while many different cryptocurrencies take differing approaches to the matter, there is one coin that has built itself on the promise of a truly decentralized and democratic approach. I'm joined now by Jake Yocom-Piatt, project lead at Decred. Jake, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi there, Asher. Thanks for having me.
All right, so for those viewers of ours who aren't so familiar with your project, who haven't sort of delved deep into the work of Decred in the past, just give us a little bit of a highlight reel. What is Decred? How does it work? And how does particularly that coin governance structure work?
Yeah, so Decred is a project where we try to harness the collective intelligence of the community and use that to have the project evolve as a function of time, so that we evolve according to the will of the community and our stakeholders. And the rough idea for how that works is that it's an opt-in system. That is, people who hold Decred don't necessarily have to participate in the governance system, but they can opt in by purchasing tickets. And the way they purchase tickets is they lock their coins for some time. They acquire one of these tickets, which you see an animation for here on just next to me. And there's these tickets go into a lottery, and every block 5 of these tickets are called, and those tickets can then be used to vote on things like consensus changes, the validity of the previous block, and also asynchronous from the blockchain, you can vote on things like project funding and project direction. So that's the way we approach this, governance, is that it's an opt-in thing, it's permissionless, and there really are no rules about who can and cannot participate.
All right, now, and this voting system, as far as I understand, has the very nicely put together and eponymous name of Politeia that you guys use. I've had a look over some of the resolutions that you guys have had voted on in the past. They range from development projects, PR projects that you guys want to work on, new elements of corporate governance. It seems like you are trying to democratize the entire process of having a cryptocurrency. Can you talk us through that idea?
For sure. What we figured is that when we launched back in February 2016, we figured that we would approach this from a most important decisions first perspective. And the way this works is that decentralizing the governance process is not a simple thing. And recently, I think October of 2018, we put our off-chain system called Politeia into production per your comments. And that system is used to make project level decisions. So beyond just going, what should the consensus rules be, because that was the most important thing that we decided to address first, there's also this important matter of, well, we have a project treasury, which is 10% of every block reward, and how are we supposed to spend that? Should we spend it all on going to the casino? Should we spend it on a dev team that I hire directly myself? Should we spend it, on, just all on marketing? There's a whole bunch of questions as to how to allocate resources, and allocating resources is typically done by elected officials in nation-state governments. And to break with that, what we tried to do is that we tried to take our ticket system, which we use for on-chain decision-making, and bring that off-chain so that the same, the same fairness that is present with our on-chain system is brought off-chain, so that when it comes to project decisions and how to allocate funds, it's as reasonably fair as we can make it. And in that sense, it really is breaking new ground, because it gets away from the model of having elected officials or having to delegate your stake to a third party who then votes it on your behalf.
Mm-hmm. So now we've got sort of our audience has a comfortable level understanding of what Decred is doing. Let's talk a little bit about that sort of elephant in the crypto room at the moment, Libra, and what they're proposing, because they've been sort of said to have a somewhat novel approach to the coin governance, obviously the consortium method that they have seen as key to getting that sort of balance between total decentralization and still maintaining some element of control. As someone obviously working very closely in this coin governance space, what do you make of that Libra model?
Well, I think many of us in the cryptocurrency space are keen to see, Libra come to life, in the sense that it would normalize cryptocurrencies across the board. There are major issues with it, which is that the issue that I've seen with many other cryptocurrencies that do governance is rather than trying to make it about policies, they end up making it about people. so that the same models are present. That is, that you have a central planning committee, whether it's elected or unelected, and that central planning committee really runs the project, and there's very little churn in who comprises that central planning committee. And in the case of Libra, what we see there's an appointed central planning committee, which is the people who participate in proof of stake, and that model is, while I commend them for running the ball in that direction, I see it as a structure that's going to likely generate more of the same. That is, that it's effectively a board of directors. Someone appoints that board of directors, and those board of directors have decisions and sovereignty that isn't bounded by the people who actually hold the underlying tokens or coins. So from a governance perspective, I'm a bit skeptical because I don't see this as a fairer game. The thing that really, in my view, is unique about cryptocurrencies is that they create a fairer game so that everyone wants to play, whether it's people in Israel, people in the United States, people in Iran, people in China, people everywhere want to play this game because it's fairer. And I think that is, that's what we endeavor to do with Decred. Whereas I think Libra is taking a little bit more of the classical nation state, corporate entity, centralized governing approach.
And so then, obviously this seems to be the way that if Libra does go ahead, or even if it doesn't, because of its sort of fanfare, media exposure, mainstream coverage that it's getting, this seems to be the mechanism through which a lot of the mainstream population are going to come to terms with and come to understand cryptocurrencies through the lens of Libra, for better or for worse. What impacts do you think that could have on the way that future coins, perhaps, or the way that the public perceives the governance of coins going into the future? Again, regardless of whether Libra is a success or not, do you think that lens could risk coloring the way that people move forward with their notion of how a cryptocurrency should be governed and controlled?
I think it will broach that subject and really start the conversation there, which is that I think that the average person is likely unaware of the extent to which, say, Libra's consensus mechanism would be, just sort of an extension of the nation-state corporate governance that we see, where there's a bunch of directors or there's a bunch of senior officers at a company, and they pretty much call all the shots. So I think that it would be comfortable for people in the sense that it's close to something they already understand. But I expect in relatively short order they would see the shortcomings of it. For example, if most of the entities in any one of these central planning committees are from a single nation state, that nation state's government can exert an enormous amount of influence over the process of the governance in that system. So they show up and they go, Facebook and 50 other VC-backed US-based corporations do A, B, or C. They're going to do it. And those shortcomings I would expect would be evident, as a function of time. So I wouldn't really see it as something I'm concerned about it coloring the perception of newer governance models. In fact, I would actually see it as a nice way to transition from the existing governance models that we're all familiar with to these more radical ones that depart more fully from what we've seen.
All right, so that stepping stone ideal, I guess, it does become a critical notion. Do you think that this Libra can be the stepping stone? I talk both in a governance perspective and also in a general, cryptocurrency mass adoption perspective. Do you think that Libra can be the stepping stone, the gateway drug, however you want to phrase it, to get people into cryptos, into more hard form cryptos, into something like Decred?
Well, I think you got to start somewhere, and the legacy fiat banking system is very, people are very, very, what do I want to say, conditioned to it. So people are very conditioned to this system. Anything we can do to start to drag them away from the existing legacy financial system, that's a win overall for the space. And I expect that process will continue. And I think it's a step in the right direction, even though, I personally am not an enormous fan of social media. As you may or may not be able to see, I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on Twitter, I'm not on, most platforms.
So then personal qualms aside, I guess I got to ask the question that I suppose a lot of our viewers often ask when it comes to most things related to cryptocurrencies of various sorts. Why doesn't Bitcoin solve these problems? What is it that Decred does that Bitcoin is unable to achieve?
Well, yeah, that's actually what drove us to create Decred is that we used to do a full node Bitcoin implementation called BTC Suite, and we worked on that from 2013 till 2015 roughly. And what we noticed is that there are some serious shortcomings in the Bitcoin space, but what has happened is that Bitcoin is effectively run by a central planning committee, and the people on that central planning committee, while very technically talented and and sort of what I want to say academically gifted, these people, it's just another central planning committee. If you are on the outside and you want to get in and start making protocol changes to Bitcoin, it's good luck. So we encountered that problem firsthand because we got very close to that. We sort of saw how the sausage was made. And my view is that decentralizing the ledger is the first step. You're creating a fairer game to make timestamps, and that really gets rid of banks, or sort of offers an alternative to banks by creating a way to store and transmit value. What then became, what we observed is just that, now there's a central planning committee that runs this awesome, decentralized timestamping mechanism, and they really did not want to change. Bitcoin could have become, could have turned into Decred, but it was the interests were so entrenched by the time we had shown up that there was really no chance of evolution in that, in that kind of a sense. And plus, it's a bit of a violation of the social contract of Bitcoin, which is kind of spun as being what is it? It doesn't evolve, and that's a feature as opposed to a bug. We saw it more as a bug, and evolution is really the where we're trying to take this, which is that our whole society is underpinned by unfair games of one form or another, and by continuing to iterate this process of making fairer games, we can sort of advance societally and in addition to technologically. And Bitcoin just didn't really see it that way. For example, all their changes have to be soft fork changes as opposed to hard fork changes, whereas Decred doesn't make the distinction between the two. In our view, each of those are both consensus changes, and that's all that matters. And we vote on those, and then we move on.
But so it's an interesting point, and to come full circle here back to Decred and the Politeia voting system. You guys not only vote in terms of sort of internal network changes and changes to sort of algorithmic approaches and the sort of the technical plumbing, as it were, of the network. You also vote on projects you want to fund and very specific things that sort of come out of Decred, and anything, I guess, is potentially on the table. Now, there are many that would say when it comes to their currencies, that's not necessarily, if you want to create a digital gold, you don't want that gold to be, taken and to be involved in certain different other projects or sort of various governance. It seems a bit too active, I guess, for some. Do you see that distinction in what Decred is versus what something like, say, Bitcoin is?
I think that there are people who see constancy as a virtue, as you're pointing out. And, my view of it is that, yes, there's a certain amount of safety from that. So it could be argued that, hey, that's a little bit more predictable. But in the grand scheme of things, technology changes over time. As awesome as anything we develop today is 10, 20, 30, 40 years later, it could, there could be something much better. And I think that obstinacy in the context of change could lead to essentially technological decay. So it's over time, you're not going to be incorporating the best technology. You're just going to have something that works and it's predictable, and you're going to be able to say that there's no inflation. But based on the way they change their rules, if the miners and the core developers and the community wanted to issue more Bitcoins, I think they could do it, even though it would violate the current standing social contract. So, so in terms of a good store of value, while it's possible to change everything in Decred, you have to look at what people are incentivized to change, which is that people aren't incentivized to, for example, issue a whole bunch more Decred, because then the people who currently control, the stake and and own the coins, they would see their value diluted. So there's a bunch of trade-offs, and the way I view this whole technology is that blockchain is about doing what everybody agrees on. If the bulk of us agree to, I don't know, all wear funny hats or shave a cat or, fund some project, that's great, and we can advance on that basis. But I think that if we're unable to advance what we all agree on, the value of having something we all agree on starts to diminish over time.
All right, so then in touching on that spirit of change, development, growth, and the future, you're a year into the Politeia project. You've managed to vote on a number of different propositions. A number have been not approved and put dead in the water. But where to from here? Let's looking out beyond the short term, the medium and long term, a few years down the line. What do you see for Decred?
So what we're hoping is that, recently in the past year, there's 3 major projects that we've approved on Politeia off-chain, which is pursuing a decentralized exchange where there's no trading fees and pseudo-random order matching. We also approved our PR firm, which you may or may not be familiar with, Ditto PR. That was a very contentious vote, and that was about a year ago. We also have agreed to take the project treasury and to put it in a smart contract so that it's formally, held in custody by the stakeholders and not a centralized corporate entity. So those are some big milestones, and where things are going is we're hoping to put every single draw that the project makes against the treasury into this system so that we can start to have all of our budgeting run against Politeia. And our hope is that that'll occur within a year, and we'll keep evolving after that point.
All right, well, it sounds like there's certainly plenty more to come out of this project. We'll be fascinated to see how that does come out and how the nature of corporate governments does develop in the crypto sphere. It's such a fascinating set of topics and something that needs to be constantly watched and made aware of. Jake, I want to thank you so much for joining us on BLOCKTV to help break down a little bit about this critical topic, and stay with us at blocktv.com for all the latest in news and information. I'm Asher Westrop Evans. Thanks for watching.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.